Welcome to Canadian Innovators, the show that celebrates innovation, entrepreneurs, and the Canadian spirit. I'm Jocelyn, and every week we introduce a new entrepreneur or expert in the economy to tell their stories and unpack the challenges of keeping jobs in Canada, as well as discuss potential solutions for job growth and prosperity. Energy is in front and center in the news today, from the developing energy crisis in Europe to the price of the pumps right here in Canada. It is on the top of everyone's mind as both Canada and Europe are faced with the prospect of a very cold winter with a short supply of energy due to the dependence on Russian oil and the Canadian federal government's stubborn resistance to get Canadian resources to market. Joining us to discuss this today is Mike Rose, President and Chief Executive of Tourmaline. Tourmaline is a Canadian senior crude oil and natural gas exploration company focused on long-term growth through exploration. Mr. Rose has been the chairman and president and chief executive officer of Tourmaline since he founded the company in August 2008. Mike has more than 44 years of experience in the oil and gas industry and held various exploration and production positions, including managing exploration and petroleum engineering research for a large E&P company before founding and selling two companies. Mr. Rose is educated at Queen's University, graduating with an honors degree in geology. Among other awards, Mr. Rose is the recipient of the Stanley Slipper Gold Medal from the Canadian Society of Petroleum Geologists. Welcome to the program, Mike.
Thank you.
So, Mike, I have to ask, tell us about this award. I've never heard of the Slipper Gold Medal, Stanley Slipper Gold Medal. What is that about?
It's a bit of an obscure one. They've awarded, I don't know, maybe 18 or 20 of them through time. It's sort of like getting the geologist MVP, if it was baseball or hockey. So that's why it's on there. So I've won other things, but that's the only one I mentioned. So I have a little gold medal, sits on my desk. And so it's sort of for being a good geologist.
Awesome. So could you give us a quick overview of Tourmaline Energy and what you do? I think we have some pictures here that you're going to walk us through.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to talk to the pictures. I'll just give you a story while they're going in the background. Anyway, we started Tourmaline in August, as you mentioned, of 2008, really right when the financial crisis was starting. We'd sold Duvernay Oil Corp, our previous E&P, to Shell Canada. And that closed in July of, it actually closed a little bit after that. Anyway, we'd agreed to the price and it was $5.6 billion. So it was actually a good time to start a company because, we were well capitalized personally and we had a happy bunch of shareholders. So it was a good time to start again, albeit, a bit of a frightening time. We've grown the company through its 14 years. So we're now a senior Canadian producer. So we produce over 500,000 BOEs a day. We built it mostly through what we call E&P, which stands for exploration and production. That's that acronym. And then some complementary, acquisitions at the right time during the 14 years. And there were really three periods of those. The first one was right when we started the company. People were really worried. It was one of the few times the majors were willing to sell tier one assets in what we viewed as the best plays in Western Canada. And we'd been doing it for quite a while. So we took full advantage of that. The second phase was really in 2016, at a pretty good valuation. We basically bought Duvernay back from Shell. We stayed close with them all the way along. And I worked for Shell for 14 years before I went off and did the independent route. And so we got a lot of those assets back. And then we took full advantage of the COVID crisis because we didn't carry much debt. We never have. And so we were one of the few companies that, could do things during that crisis in 2020 and did some, really, really good valuations and just kept building our position in what we see are the two best gas plays. So the Alberta Deep Basin and then the BC Alberta Montney. So, in the end, we have the largest future drilling inventory of any E&P in North America by kind of being, steady plotters through the whole piece and making sure your balance sheet's in good shape. So as I mentioned, we produce over 500,000 BOEs a day. We're Canada's largest natural gas producer. We're the largest natural gas liquid producer. So that includes things like
I'm
propane.
gonna stop you there because we got to go to break. We're gonna hear more about Tourmaline when we get back after this commercial break. We're back. I'm speaking with the president and CEO of Tourmaline, Mike Rose. Mike, we had to go to break and I had to cut you off. But let's pick up where we just left off.
Sure. I mentioned we're senior. We're the largest nat gas producer in Canada. We have the largest gas reserves, and we've actually built and control all our own infrastructure. So that's gas plants and pipelines. So we're the fourth largest midstream company from a gas processing standpoint in Canada. The net result of having that infrastructure and being a low-cost capital executor is we kind of got the lowest supply costs in the basin, and as it turns out, in North America. So we're, profitable at $1.50 gas prices. So we've kind of built a machine that can survive low prices, which, for the most part in nat gas, especially, it's been low for a long time. It's a lot better right now, but it's a cyclical business. And we think we've secured the best staff through the years, and we've kept it small. So we only have those two big gas plays. So, we're fourth largest producer overall in Canada. We only have 230 people in the head office. So it's good. That's it.
Quite a story now, Mike. Many of my entrepreneurs have those bits when they just didn't think they were going to make it. Did you ever have one of those stories, and would you share it with us?
Yeah, not at Tourmaline, but it was when I left Shell. So, I was doing well at Shell, but I had an opportunity with an individual who was kind of the money raiser, and he wanted to, get into the business, and he'd been in it a long time ago. He's older than me. So, I was going to be his technical guy. And so I found a package of properties for him to buy, and he was successful. And then, he said, well, you got to run it. So I left Shell. And then once I was the only employee, and then I found out that, well, he hadn't quite raised the 11.7 million we needed. It was only half that he'd raised. Plus, he'd made a commitment on the money he had raised that we had to go public in 5 months. And I knew nothing about that and how to do that, because I was kind of a geologist from a big major where you only do, a certain kind of narrow segment of work. Anyway, it all worked out, but it was a little stressful in those early days. The financial crisis was an interesting time, and we were going to be fine, except, if the Western economies failed, then, I was actually worried because I had a big tax bill because we sold Duvernay to Shell. So I actually paid my taxes early just in case, because the one thing, for sure is the tax man's still going to come, whether your currency's been completely devalued or not. And then, during the COVID crisis, it was a really stressful time. Oil went negative. That was kind of new. And so, the company was going to be fine, but it was a tough time. And, staff was, worried and didn't know where the world was going to go. And, we didn't either, but we were very positive and it all worked out.
It's not all sunshine and roses running a company, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like Canadian companies strike me as having incredible innovation. Could you talk to us about Tourmaline's innovation? I know you have some really neat innovation that you could share with us.
Sure. I think, innovation and its innovative application of technology, it kind of pervades all aspects of the company, particularly in the drilling and fracking piece. The drop in costs has been remarkable. So, back in Duvernay Oil Corp days, we were one of the first 3 companies to figure the Montney play out. And those initial horizontals in the Montney, in 2007, they took 25 days to drill. And recently, we've been completing horizontals that are almost 3 times longer in as little as 6 days. So you can imagine what that's done to the costs. And then notwithstanding, we figure out how to make them produce a lot better as well. So we have a whole segment of, innovative things we do on the environmental performance improvement, but I think I'll save that for one of the questions later. just from a business standpoint, another place we've been, I think, really innovative is in our approach to natural gas marketing. So it's a strategy we started probably 10 years ago. We knew we were going to be a good sized gas producer, and it didn't make a lot of sense to just sell your gas locally at our two hubs that people call ACO, that's in Alberta, and Station 2, that's in BC. So, when it was available, we took out space on all the pipelines exiting the basin. These are existing pipelines. And so we're now the most diversified as far as number of markets we access. So we access 11 markets outside of the basin.
So I'm just going to stop you there, Mike, because we got to go to commercial, and we'll be back. We'll hear about this when we get back. And we're back. I'm speaking with Mike Rose from Tourmaline Energy. Mike, we had to go to a commercial, and you were just in the middle of telling us about some of your great innovations. So carry on.
Sure. I was talking about our innovative approach to gas marketing. So we are now, through the strategy, the most diversified of all the North American large cap gas producers. We sell at our two hubs in Canada and then 11 in the US. And we get to those hubs on existing pipelines with lower tolls. So we can actually compete with our US nat gas producers in their markets. We get there for the same price or less, and we have much lower supply costs. So in effect, what we've done is when you look at a map, people kind of historically, they look at Western Canada and go, ooh, you're kind of at the end of the pipe. But by doing what we did, we're actually at the front of the pipe. And so, it gives us an advantage competing with our US peers actually in their own markets.
Awesome technology. That's great stuff. Mike, it's all over the news about Europe and Canada suffering through an especially long and cold winter with high energy prices. Your thoughts on the reason for this?
Well, I think the highest energy prices worldwide and where the supply crises are the worst, they correlate 100% with poor energy policy. So the regimes and jurisdictions that pursued renewables too quickly without a nat gas backup have the most acute supply crisis. So that's Germany, that's California, and we're a huge gas supplier to California, so we know that market really well. I don't think Ontario's that far behind either, but they're trying to fix it in a hurry. So now those jurisdictions have an energy supply crisis and an accelerating economic crisis. So I think most of the Western jurisdictions and governments sort of prioritize the environment over energy supply, energy security, and energy affordability. And you need to consider all aspects if you want like a really, sensible and economic energy policy, because energy is actually the backbone of our current civilization, and we all need it. 81% of the energy is currently supplied of the whole stack by fossil fuels, and that's been holding pretty flat for pretty much a decade. So we need all forms of energy. It's and not or. We need them all.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can Canada do to turn the situation around?
Well, one thing we could do is certainly grow our international LNG business. So, Canada's blessed with massive nat gas supplies. We actually produce the lowest emission nat gas in the world. If we don't supply the growing nat gas demand in the world, it'll be supplied by jurisdictions with much higher emissions. So it's actually an environmental win if you use Canadian gas. Obviously, it's a big economic win for the whole country. And it's not just the jobs and the capital that are spent when you build the liquefaction facilities on the coast and the pipelines. The real win is you need to keep creating the supply for decades. So it's billions of expenditure and tens of thousands of jobs creating the supply every year. And these are 30 plus year deals. And it's a great opportunity for improving First Nations prosperity. So it's kind of a hat trick, if you like. And that's the game that Canada can win.
It certainly is a hat trick. And I'm hearing from almost every manufacturer and business that they're struggling with affordable energy. How do you think the current federal government's position on the oil and gas industry is impacting affordable energy?
Well, I think restricting egress, pipelines, and not allowing new projects to proceed that pinch supply, carbon taxes, accelerating renewables without a nat gas backup, all make energy more expensive for everybody, for all industries, for all Canadians. So I think, for environmental and economic reasons, we should be growing our oil and gas production, not actually shrinking it. An emissions cap, like specifically a 2030 emissions cap on just Canadian oil and gas, will definitely make energy costs more expensive for all Canadians, and particularly those who can afford it the least. I mean, we call it energy poverty. I think we could have millions of Canadians in what's effectively energy poverty. Will eliminate, if we proceed with this 40% reduction by 2030, it'll eliminate hundreds of thousands of jobs, and they're well-paying jobs. And there's no avalanche of green jobs coming. I mean, there are a few, to be fair, but I think people will be green because they're sick with hunger and they're sick of being poor.
Yeah, I agree with all you said. We have to take a quick break. Welcome back. My guest today is Mike Rose from Tourmaline Energy. Mike, before we went to the break, we were talking about federal government and its policy and its impact on affordable energy and Canadian competitiveness. But Mike, if you could tell Canadians one thing about the resource sector, what would it be?
It would be the size of the opportunity that we have in both oil and natural gas in Canada. If I was the natural resources minister, I'd have trouble sleeping. It's so exciting. We have the largest gas reserves in the world. If you looked at the Montney, and now I'll get into, you can tell I'm a geologist, but we've produced so far 22 of an estimated 850 TCF of reserves out of the Montney. So it is absolutely hands down the best resource for LNG supply in the whole world. Like, we're still in the top of the first inning, pitching to the first batter, if you put it in baseball terms with respect to what's left. Our two big, basins in the U.S. that we compete with, and they supply the Gulf Coast, the Haynesville and the Marcellus. Like, second half of this decade, they'll reach their tipping point and roll over. So they've produced somewhere between 40 and 45% of the reserves that they have. The oil sands, we put in caps. We're not an oil sands producer, but we sort of limited the size of, the resource we could develop. But reality is technology keeps getting better in all aspects of our lives, but it gets better in oil sands too. So the economically recoverable extent of the oil sands will keep getting bigger. We've embarked or are embarking on the largest CCUS project in the history of mankind, which will take the emissions from the oil sands, almost down to zero. So it's huge, gas wise, in the basins I'm just talking about the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, but in the St. Lawrence lowlands, in the Arctic, on the East Coast, there's over 100 TCF of gas reserves that we're not developing yet. And just for reference, Canada produces about 6.5 TCF per year. So we're talking hundreds of years of economic development. So I would not be able to sleep.
So, Mike, let's talk about net zero and the UN Agenda 2030. What's your thoughts on how this will affect Canada and its prosperity?
The term net zero gets tossed around a lot. I'm not sure if everybody knows exactly what it means. We focus on full environmental performance improvement and try and encourage others to do that as well. So it's air, land, and water. It's not just one emission in the atmosphere, and they're all critically important. So, we have 5-year environmental performance improvement plans with hard targets and, a realistic technology plan we think we can get to. They match our kind of formal economic or EP growth plans. They're set in 5-year increments as well. And as we get through each segment, we produce a new plan and evergreen them, if you like. And, we've selected areas that we think we can make a big difference. One's diesel displacement. So got all our drilling rigs and moving on to frac crews now off diesel and on to nat gas, which is much cleaner. It reduces CO2 and a whole bunch of other much more toxic components. We lead the basin in water recycling, made huge investments in that, methane emission reduction. And we think that's the way forward. Like, what's in our DNA is execution. So go reduce emissions now. And we'll see, what it looks like in 2050. But none of us really know. We like the term energy transformation a lot more than energy transition, because transition suggests to most people that you're getting off oil and gas, and we don't think we are anytime soon, but we can certainly do a great job on making it cleaner.
All great ideas, but I just have one more question because we just got about 20 seconds left. There was 150 billion worth of scrapped energy projects in Canada. Your thoughts on that in about 15 seconds?
Sure. Well, one 4 BCF per day LNG project will eliminate 64 megatons per year every year. Canada, that's 25% of Canada's emissions. It'll create more than 25,000 jobs and generate 10 billion plus of export income every year for 30 years, which is like a 1% GDP increase for the whole country.
Awesome. Great conversations, Mike. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm Jocelyn Bamford. Thank you for watching Canadian Innovators. If you're an innovator, tell us your story. Write to us at CanadianInnovators@thenewsforum.ca, and we'll see you next time.